For 3 years, she carried a secret so classified that even mentioning it could end her career. But when she used a single hand signal in the Pentagon, Captain Amanda Carter adjusted her dress uniform one final time before entering the Pentagon's most intimidating corridor. The polished marble floors reflected the fluorescent lights above, creating an almost mirror-like pathway that seemed to stretch endlessly toward her destination. Room 3 × 10⁸88. The office of General Marcus Thompson, a man whose reputation preceded him like thunder before lightning. Amanda had heard the stories whispered in officer clubs and mess halls across 4 continents. Thompson was old-school military, a Gulf War veteran who had clawed his way up from enlisted ranks to become one of the most feared and respected generals in the Army. He was known for his unconventional methods of evaluating officers, often putting them through psychological tests disguised as casual conversation. Some called him brilliant, others called him ruthless. Amanda suspected he was both. The heavy oak door bore a simple nameplate: General M. Thompson, Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence. Amanda knocked twice, her knuckles producing a sharp sound that echoed in the hallway. "Enter," came a gravelly voice from within. The office was exactly what Amanda had expected. Walls lined with commendations, photographs of Thompson with presidents and foreign dignitaries, and a massive mahogany desk that dominated the room like an aircraft carrier in a harbor. Behind it sat General Thompson himself, a man in his early 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance in seconds. "Captain Carter," he said without looking up from her file. "West Point, top 5% of your class, intelligence officer with deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and..." He flipped through pages. "Interesting. Some classified locations that aren't specified here." He finally raised his eyes to meet hers. "Have a seat." Amanda settled into the leather chair across from his desk, maintaining perfect posture despite the chair's attempt to swallow her whole. The general continued flipping through her file, occasionally making small sounds of approval or interest. The silence stretched uncomfortably, broken only by the distant hum of air conditioning and the muffled sounds of Pentagon life beyond the thick walls. "Tell me, Captain," Thompson said suddenly, closing her file with a snap. "What do you think separates good intelligence officers from great ones?" Amanda had prepared for this type of question. "Attention to detail, sir. The ability to see patterns where others see chaos, and the wisdom to know when information is actionable versus merely interesting." Thompson leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Textbook answer. But you know what I think?" He stood and walked to the window overlooking the Potomac River. "I think it's about understanding that in this business, everyone's testing everyone else all the time. Every conversation, every gesture, every seemingly innocent comment could be a probe." He turned back to face her, his expression shifting to something more predatory. "For instance, you young officers today think you're so sophisticated, so well-trained. You come out of your schools thinking you know everything about warfare and intelligence." His voice carried a mocking edge now. "But real warfare, real intelligence work, that's learned in the field, not in classrooms." Amanda felt the shift in the room's atmosphere. This wasn't a promotion review anymore. This was exactly the kind of test Thompson was famous for. She remained silent, waiting for him to reveal his hand. Thompson's face drained of all color, his weathered features going ashen as he stared at Amanda's hand. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For a man who had faced enemy fire in the deserts of Iraq and commanded troops in some of the most dangerous places on Earth, he looked utterly stunned. "Captain Carter," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "How in God's name do you know that signal?" The silence that followed General Thompson's whispered question stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Amanda watched as the color slowly returned to his face, but his eyes remained fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel like a specimen under a microscope. Thompson moved to his desk with deliberate steps, his hand hovering over the secure telephone. "Captain, I'm going to ask you one more time, and I suggest you think very carefully before you answer." His voice had transformed from the casual tone of moments before into something cold and official. "How do you know classified Navy SEAL hand signals?" Amanda's mind raced through her options. The truth was buried under layers of classification so deep that admitting to it could destroy her career, or worse. But lying to a general officer was a court-martial offense. And Thompson clearly knew enough about SEAL protocols to recognize what he'd seen. "Sir," she began, but Thompson cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Don't." He picked up the secure phone and dialed a 3-digit extension. "This is Thompson. I need a security team in my office immediately. Full lockdown protocol." Thompson's face drained of all color, his weathered features going ashen as he stared at Amanda's hand. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For a man who had faced enemy fire in the deserts of Iraq and commanded troops in some of the most dangerous places on Earth, he looked utterly stunned. "Captain Carter," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "How in God's name do you know that signal?" The silence that followed General Thompson's whispered question stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Amanda watched as the color slowly returned to his face, but his eyes remained fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel like a specimen under a microscope. He hung up and turned back to Amanda. "Captain Carter, you're not to leave this room or speak to anyone until this matter is resolved." For the next 6 hours, Hayes and a rotating team of interrogators subjected Amanda to the most intense questioning of her life. They approached the problem from every angle: her training history, her deployments, her personal relationships, her financial records. They wanted to know about every person she'd ever met, every base she'd ever visited, every operation she'd ever been briefed on. "Let's go through your deployment history again," said Major Williams, the third interrogator to take a seat across from her. "Iraq 2020 to 2021, Afghanistan 2022, and then..." He flipped through pages. "There's a gap here. 8 months where your location is listed as classified assignment. What are you doing during that time?" Amanda had answered this question 5 times already. "I was assigned to a Joint Intelligence Fusion Center. The location and mission details are classified above my current clearance level to discuss." "That's convenient," Williams replied sarcastically. "A classified assignment that you can't talk about, which just happens to coincide with when you might have learned SEAL protocols." Hayes returned to the room, carrying a fresh cup of coffee and a thick file folder. "Captain, we've been at this for hours, and your story hasn't changed. That's either a sign of remarkable consistency or very good preparation." She sat down and opened the folder. "But here's what's interesting. We've contacted every Joint Intelligence Fusion Center that was operational during your supposed assignment. None of them have any record of you." Amanda realized they were trying to break her through exhaustion and repetition. It was a classic technique. Keep asking the same questions until a subject either broke down or made a mistake that revealed the truth. "Let's try a different approach," Hayes said, settling back in her chair with the air of someone preparing for a long conversation. "Captain, I'm going to be direct with you. We know you're hiding something. The question is whether you're hiding it because you're a traitor or because you're protecting something legitimate that you've been ordered to keep secret." Amanda looked up at the ceiling, calculating her options. The oath she'd taken 3 years ago had been specific and absolute. But sitting in this underground room, facing accusations of treason, she wondered if that oath was worth destroying her life to protect. "If I were to hypothetically know something that was classified beyond my current clearance," Amanda said carefully, "what would be the proper procedure for addressing that situation?" Leaving Amanda alone with the Admiral, Mitchell moved to the recording device and switched it off with a decisive click, then produced a small electronic device from his pocket and activated it. The device emitted a barely audible hum, a signal jammer that would defeat any listening devices in the room. "Captain Amanda Carter," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "Or should I say, journalist Jessica Morgan, war correspondent for Global News Network." Amanda felt tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed during 6 hours of interrogation, finally threatening to spill over. "Admiral, I wasn't sure you'd remember." "Remember?" Mitchell laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Captain, what you did in Syria is burned into my memory like a brand. The question is, how the hell did you end up in an interrogation room in the Pentagon?" Amanda explained the encounter with General Thompson, the hand signals, and the investigation that followed. As she spoke, Mitchell's expression grew darker, his jaw tightening with what appeared to be barely controlled anger. "Those idiots," he muttered when she finished. "They nearly blew an operation 3 years in the making." He leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "Amanda, I need to know, have you told them anything about Syria?" "Nothing, sir. I've maintained operational security exactly as briefed." Mitchell nodded approvingly. Good, because what I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room, and after tonight, we may never be able to speak of it again. Team leader Rodriguez said you were the fastest study he'd ever worked with, Mitchell continued. By the end of the first week, you were communicating with the team like you'd been doing it for years. Amanda smiled at the memory of Chief Petty Officer Miguel Rodriguez, a gruff veteran from Texas who had initially refused to speak to her beyond operational necessities. By the end of their mission, he'd been calling her Doc and treating her like a member of his team. The insertion went perfectly, Mitchell said, his voice taking on the cadence of an after-action report. You established contact with the terrorist cell within 48 hours, gained their trust, and began feeding us intelligence about their planned attacks. For 3 weeks, everything went according to plan. But Amanda remembered when everything had gone wrong. The morning when she'd arrived at the safe house to find it empty, except for a single bloodstain on the floor and a hastily scrawled message in Arabic that translated to "The Americans are here." The cell had been feeding us false information, Mitchell continued. They knew about you from the beginning, and they've been using you to identify our safe houses and operational patterns. When they finally made their move, they hit 4 of our locations simultaneously. Amanda closed her eyes, remembering the panic in Rodriguez's voice over the radio as he reported that his team was pinned down in a building surrounded by hostile forces. The extraction helicopter had been shot down, and the backup team was still hours away. That's when you made the decision that saved 8 American lives, Mitchell said softly. You could have run. You could have maintained your cover and walked away. Instead, you chose to blow your cover and coordinate the rescue operation. General Thompson stepped forward next. Captain Carter, I owe you an apology. My test yesterday was designed to evaluate your knowledge and reactions under pressure. I never imagined it would uncover a genuine American hero. Amanda felt tears threatening again, but this time they were tears of relief and pride rather than fear and exhaustion. Thank you, sir. All of you. Colonel Hayes, who had spent the previous day trying to break her, now extended her hand with genuine respect. Captain, I've been in this business for 18 years, and I've never seen operational security maintained under that level of pressure. It was impressive. As Amanda left the Pentagon that evening, the weight of the Navy Cross on her uniform felt different from any decoration she had ever worn. It represented not just recognition of her service, but acknowledgement of a truth that had been hidden for 3 years. She was no longer Captain Amanda Carter, Army intelligence officer with a mysterious gap in her service record. She was Ghost Walker, the operative who had helped prevent a terrorist attack on American soil and save the lives of 8 Navy SEALs in the process. The setting sun cast long shadows across the Potomac River as Amanda walked to her car, knowing that her life had been forever changed by a simple hand signal and the courage to reveal a truth that had been buried in the shadows of national security. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, and new opportunities to serve her country. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she could finally be proud of who she really was.